Welcome to the Explorers Podcast with Ken Boa. Here, Ken connects with friends and peers to discuss issues in the world and practices to improve one's biblical perspective.
Welcome to Explorers, and I want to introduce you to my dear, beloved friend and associate, David White, who is the artistic director and conductor of the Georgia Boys Choir. And David, I'm just delighted to have you with me.
Well, it's a great joy. Thanks.
Yes. And I want us to just explore some ideas we have as to how beauty infuses the process, not only of the excellence in the music, but also the beauty of Christ-like formation, the life of Christ, the beauty of Christ, the spiritual dimension, and how you're using that to forge character, and it's a mentoring, it's a discipleship process. It's not just the excellence in music, but it's the excellence in living. Would you kind of describe what that looks like? Because I think you've had a huge impact on these young men's lives for many years.
Well, certainly. There are the standard of artistic level that we're striving for requires a considerable amount self-discipline and self-control. And self-discipline and self-control are not necessarily in huge supply with, 9 and 10-year-old boys.
That's right.
It certainly wasn't with me, and I doubt it was with you too. I've heard you tell stories when you were young. You were a mischievous kid.
I was indeed.
And I certainly was too. And yet, here we are trying to attain to a particular level, and it requires a lot of self-control and self-discipline. And so we have to strive to get the boys to, have a desire to do that, but then also, to reach within themselves and do the work that's necessary to do that. And in so doing, they're, without realizing, developing a character trait that hopefully will serve them well for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
We sometimes call it cross-training for life.
Cross-training for life. So it's training, isn't it? And that's the metaphor of training. As I often describe the spiritual life, it's not a matter of trying, but of training.
Right.
And it's not a matter of time, but intention, so that you're infusing with them not just a love for the music and excellence in achieving that, but more than that, there's a whole cost of discipleship, as it were. There's a sort of price of going under the tutelage, and there's a corporate rule. There's a kind of a collective rule that goes on involved in this as well, that forges their lives so that they're exemplars within that community as well, so that the younger boys are going to learn from those who've been with you longer. Right.
There's very definitely a sort of a hierarchy and a trickle down kind of aspect to the mentoring process that, a 5 and 6 year old boy who is in our apprentice choir doesn't go out in search of a mentor.
No.
Right? But has to follow. But he unwittingly looks at guys who are at the next level and thinks, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
Because he's always wanting to try to, see what's ahead, and I want to do that. And so if that guy's doing well, then that gives him something to follow.
That's right.
But there's somebody else that he's following already.
Yeah.
And so that it's now the guys that we have in our program who are 16, 17, 18 years old and have been singing with us since they were 5.
Yeah.
So for the better part of their lives, 12, 13 years, they have been doing this on a weekly basis. And they have given hundreds of performances and sung for thousands of people. And they've sung some very complex literature. They understand what it is that 6-year-old boy is going through in order to try to accomplish what it is he's trying to accomplish. And so that they can come and just sort of be. And I talk to them about leading by example, It's not like you have to come and tell this other boy who might be looking up to you, tell him what to do. Just lead by example.
Yeah. It's a kind of apprenticeship in a certain way, isn't it? In a certain way, they become, there's as you know, the 3 stages where it's an apprentice, then a journeyman, then a master. And
Right.
so the older boys become, as it were, masters. And then some of them in the intermediate would be journeymen who require less hands-on from you,
Right.
but who also they're looked up to and they're respected by the people who are trying to look to them as guides and embodiments of what they're trying to achieve.
Well, we have several levels, and our youngest level is called our apprentice choir.
You even call it that.
Yeah.
All the better. Because it's a beautiful model. But one of the things that I was admiring was about the discipline that you engage in when they travel, where they're not. Tell me about the phones and so forth, the smartphones and certain
Right.
things that they would ordinarily, you'd never even think
Right.
about.
When we travel, we don't allow them to bring cell phones along with them, and which is hard for them at first, but it doesn't take but a day or two before they realize that they're doing fine without it.
Yeah.
And I even had before we went on our last tour, a boy who is 18 years old, and once they've reached that age, we sort of give them a certain level of responsibility for chaperoning and whatnot, and actually say, please bring your phone so that we can communicate with you about various things. And if you've got a group of boys out, in a restaurant somewhere, that you have access to be able to communicate with.
Yes.
And he was glad to have this level of responsibility, but said he was actually kind of sorry he had to bring his phone because he had gotten to the point where he would look forward to the 2 or 3 weeks without his phone as sort of like a detoxification.
Yes. And that's what it is. It's almost like people are on detox. They're kind of DTs, a delirium tremens. It's almost like the same is true with media, where they have to let loose of that. But after, as you rightly say, a few days at the most, and suddenly I think that they enjoy a more analog experience of life that's less digitally driven.
Exactly. I mean, here we are taking boys on tour, and they're going through Italy or France or to Iceland or like this summer to Norway. And it would be a pity to be driving around the Golden Ring in Iceland, but be looking at your phone at whatever happens to show up on, some social media, or be, chatting with your friends back home.
Yeah.
Record it in a journal. Tell your friends about it when you get home.
That's correct.
Take pictures. Look out the window, and that's what they end up doing. Or it's dark and we're still traveling. Well, they have conversations with other
There's a
boys.
thing called conversations.
Yeah, and they have
friendships.
They have a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, not like phones are evil things.
No.
You have one, I have one,
yeah.
and we all use them for both good, but it can be a good tool, but a really bad master.
That's correct. And I see them as such, and it's very difficult because as soon as you begin to use it, you create a need for it, as it were, and then it redefines you. So you're liberating them and giving them an opportunity, indeed, in an environment of greater consciousness of their immediate environment, of relationships, of communication, of looking around, not having to record it secondhand, but rather to just enjoy it without having to always record everything.
Right. Yeah. It's, and I find myself too thinking, that here I am in a situation and, oh man, I'd love to take a picture of that and be able to show it to somebody, but okay, why don't I just, I'm just going to enjoy this sunset, or I'm going to enjoy this meal without having to brag about it to other people.
Yeah. Yes.
And so I don't know. I mean, there's a degree to which, now the various media that we have is our way of journaling, our current life.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's different. I mean, people don't keep diaries anymore, but they do journal or connect by chronologically what's happened in their lives through the various apps that they have and that kind of thing.
So when they're on a trip, let's say it's a 2-week trip, then some of them will just start actually physically journaling?
Yes, some of them take journals and write down. And I've seen, they do it different ways. Somebody will bring a brand new fresh notebook and try to write something in it. Today we did such and such. My roommate was so and so, and this is where we went and what we saw. And one guy last year, again, an older fella who had been on numerous tours, had the same journal that he had kept from several different tours, so that he could kind of look back on and realize, those experiences.
That's a valuable resource, and he'll never regret having done that.
It is.
And unlikely that he would have achieved or done that if he had been constantly required, as it were, in his mind's eye to always respond to social media or those kinds of things.
So I think that does help to. It's not like an intentional. Okay, we don't do it so that because we think we've got to control them or teach them this. It's really it's a matter of practicality. That we think that they are safer with us. I mean, it's a pretty daunting responsibility to take 30 or 40 of somebody else's children across the world.
That's true.
And that we're responsible for their safety and their well-being, and both physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And so I find that that's just better done without access to the internet.
Makes complete sense.
And frankly, even without access back home, and this is where sometimes parents at first have a little bit of a difficult time. What do you mean he's not going to have his phone? What if I need to reach him? You need to reach him, then you can reach him through us. And if it's something that's that vital, but the boy will have a much greater experience and more realistic experience if he is allowed to live in the environment that we have without distractions, even of just trying to communicate back home and that kind of thing. He's just allowed to be present with where he is. Be with the people he's with.
That's correct. So he's alive to the environment and alive to the people with whom he is sharing that environment.
Right.
More than letting this other thing dominate and direct. Now, there's another dimension that you use beauty in this whole process of not only mentoring, but you're teaching them to love and beautiful music and to also gain discipline so that they achieve greater skill and aptitude and acuity in which they can actually appreciate the music and then enjoy the actual process of learning how to master it and then to do it collectively, but to do it with excellence as well. And on an individual but a collective basis. Tell me more about that.
The idea of, in our day and time, I think that we live in a world that, where we are deluged with what I think C.S. Lewis referred to the culture of the ugly. And I think the culture of the ugly has only grown.
It's only grown.
And that all of us are deluged with this, but I think that young people, and particularly boys, are victims of the world's constant drawing at them and celebration of anti-beauty. Anti-beauty in many, many regards. Anti-beauty in behavior, anti-beauty in what they see, and definitely anti-beauty in music. And some of the ideas that music is propagating. And so, the music that thankfully has been written over the centuries, beautiful choral music, much of it having been written for boys or certainly accessible to them, is a beautiful nature that combats that anti-beauty. Just like darkness can't drive out light, only light can drive out darkness. It is only beauty can drive out, the ugliness.
Yes.
And so here we are again with using the instrument of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old boys and teaching them the beauty of this music. And there's a certain inherent beauty in a boy's voice, whether it's the naivete of the boy who's actually producing the sound. I think that's part of it, as at least in our perception of it. But then there's also just the actual aural beauty. There is no other instrument like it. And it's a wonder of God's creation, the boy's voice. And to put them together in concert, all achieving the same end and expressing the same thoughts, is something that reaches into the listener's soul and psyche in ways that he's often unprepared to be reached.
Yeah.
And so, but even more so, it reaches into the singer's psyche, in that all of a sudden he is the one who is who is the curator of this beauty of which he's capable. And he finds himself able then to use that sound that he's able to make in a positive way, and to team together with the others in his section and in his choir to communicate thoughts and emotions for which they're hardly even capable of understanding.
Yes.
But that I hope and pray and believe will stay with them all their lives.
Yeah. Because you're building a foundation of aesthetics, and you're building upon really a beauty, and beauty, as you and I have discussed before, is the portal and the gateway to that which is true and that which is good. And so it is the back door to those things as well. So, and then you're giving them skills, appreciation, capacity for reacting together, and then the synergy of the various voices and the various levels of training and so forth. You create a composite whole that's always greater than the sum of the parts as well, but there's a richness that's amplified by the beauty of the music that you've selected.
Right. Well, and there's also the texts that they end up singing, because we have some of the world's most beautiful poetry, or very often scripture, or scriptural poetry that has been written and then has been set to music in a way that expresses that the meanings behind those texts in a greater way than we can really understand them just by simply reading them alone. And so then again, it's to me it's a little bit like the fact that God, who is all-knowing and all-powerful and can accomplish anything he wants, doesn't need us to accomplish his purpose. And yet he chooses to accomplish his purpose through us, who are fallen creatures of his, redeemed creatures of his. And so sometimes I find it an interesting thing that here we have some of the most beautiful sounds and the most beautiful thoughts, and the vehicle for expressing those is the most unsuspecting thing. a 10-year-old boy who, would just as soon go out and, play and jump and run and get dirty and he loves that just as much. And yet it's a miracle that God can then turn that creature into the vessel that communicates such ineffable beauty.
Yeah. A unique manner as well, because although there is a collective whole, that each brings another component, and there's the prism of their personality. It's reflected, it's refracted in such a way that goes through that. So you have this natural capacity amplified by the skills of the others. So you have a collective good, a collective whole, a collective beauty that is winsome and attractive, and then also has a salutary benefit on those who hear. So it's also ministering to the hearers as well. So you're in their performance. It's more than a performance. It's actually a praise. It's a worship. It's a collective immersion in beauty that can be transferred and understood in a way that we didn't have before. It's a wonderful thought.
Indeed, it is. Yeah. And so, I just count myself greatly privileged to get to do that and to be in that world and to live in that oral environment and to create that sound.
Yes.
And to, sometimes it's in rehearsal where it's more beautiful than we've ever done it in a performance. And we're the only ones who get to hear it. Yeah. And so I try to help them to realize, how wonderful and special it is. And sometimes, we have regular rehearsals, during the afternoons, a couple times a week. 3 or 4 times a year, we have to get together for like an all-day Saturday rehearsal because we got something coming up. And so I'll pull them together for 6 hours on a Saturday. And we get so much work done during those times. And I like to point out to them that there are a lot of things that a lot of ways they could have spent their day. A lot of ways where at least, looking at what they had to do that morning, they might have thought, I would rather go and do this or that. They could have been playing with their friends. They could have been playing video games. They could have been outside. They could have been playing basketball or football or soccer. And maybe that's what they wanted to do. But there is almost nothing in the world that they could have done that ultimately would have been more beneficial to them in the aspect of what it has done for them in their inner being.
Yes, and that beauty and that truth and that goodness enriches their inner being, their soul, and creates a collective good that's then shared as well. And I wanted to think then, along that line, some of your experiences, what songs, what particular things that come to your mind that might be good exemplars of these things, because you know a lot of music and you know a lot of the words because of the singing, and it's a way in which you memorize great poetry and so forth as well. Is there a particular exemplar that comes to mind, or something, a surprise perhaps?
There are people often ask me, "Oh, what's your favorite song?" And it is impossible for me to choose. It's like, it's impossible to choose our favorite in a lot of categories, right? Yeah. But there are quite a few that have particularly moved me in the ways that we're discussing. I think this morning of song with a prayer by John Donne, "Bring us, O Lord God, at our last awakening into the gate of heaven, that we can, when we dwell there," and he goes through and he describes many of the beauties of heaven. And so there's a song by Philip Stopford called "Bring Us, O Lord God" that expresses that text. There's famous setting of that same text by the composer William Harris. And it's beautiful, but I really love this one by Philip Stopford. And also Hubert Parry's Songs of Farewell, another song about heaven. My soul, there is a country far beyond the stars where stands a winged sentry. And it's just, and again, it just goes and it describes the heaven. Song by Charles Wood, O thou the central orb of righteous love, pure beam of the Most High, that describes God as the central orb around which all the saints and all the angels are all in orbit.
Wow.
And the glorious day when we will be among those in that orbit. There are a couple of settings of the beautiful prayer, give us the wings of faith to rise within the veil and see the saints above.
Yes.
How great their joy. There's a beautiful one by James Whitbourne, who incidentally, I understand passed away last week, but we recently sang his beautiful setting of that prayer, give us the wings of faith.
Thank you for tuning in to the Explorers Podcast. We'd like to remind you that Reflections Ministries is supported by the generosity of our friends like you. If you'd like to donate, please visit reflections.org today. Now back to the podcast.
You're doing multiple things because you've got the aesthetics of the music, you have the words of the music, you have the experience of them working together on varying levels to understand and to achieve and to reify, to bring it into being. And I have to say, when I've been in many of your concerts, that there have been ineffable moments of poignant sorrow and desire and longing, all combined together. The beauty creates a kind of a haunting, a sweet sorrow sometimes, a holy longing, shall I say, a Sehnsucht. And that Sehnsucht is for more. So what you're really doing, I found this happening when I hear the concerts that you've done. When you were at the Wednesday morning men's fellowship, and there were a couple of them that were just, the men were weeping almost. I could see that they were deeply moved, because you're achieving a thing that creates a haunting longing for more than they know that they have. But you're showing those sunlit lands, those distant lands, and they get a little hint, and it gives them a desire for more, and it transports them in their mind's eye into that place. And I've got to believe that kind of experience in the soul of a boy, who's the vehicle by which that is achieved, has to be very rich and powerful.
I think so. I also don't know, though, that it's necessarily realized at the time, but that there will come a time when it is realized.
Yes.
And it is an interesting thing to look and see grown men crying at the sound of these boys. One other song that has been particularly meaningful to me over the years is one that I commissioned composer Rene Clausen to write. I was conductor of Florida's Singing Sons Boy Choir in Fort Lauderdale at the time, and it was the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the organization's founding. And so we decided to commission a piece to be written. And so I landed on Rene Clausen to write this, because he'd written some other things that I really admired. And so he allowed me to choose the texts, and we decided to make it we made it a 3-movement suite, what we called Garden of Beauty.
Mm.
And the first movement is Barter, and I'll come back to that, which is a poem by Sarah Teasdale. And then the second one is called Beauty, and the third one is Playtime.
Mm.
So when the voices of children are heard on the green and laughing is heard on the hill, William Blake.
Mm.
But the first movement, barter, I've performed many times and taught it to lots and lots of boys since then, and it's now been 20 years since it was written. And that poem in particular kind of speaks to what it is that I'm trying to get them to understand. Because it says, life has loveliness to sell. Loveliness can be we've been talking about beauty. So life, loveliness and beauty are similar. Life has loveliness to sell, all beautiful and splendid things. And then it talks about some of those beautiful and splendid things. Blue waves whitened on a cliff, soaring fire that sways and sings, children's faces looking up, eyes that love. Boys don't think about that as a beautiful thing. And I try to explain to them, right now it's, maybe it's your mother's father. Someday you're going to look into some eyes that you never had thought were so beautiful. Mm-hmm. Eyes that love. And it goes on and describes many different beautiful things. And finally it says, spend all you have for love. Buy it and never count the cost. For one white shining hour of peace, give all you have been or could be. And so in their lives, they're going to do a lot of different things. There will be some of them who will go on to be professional musicians. I've got boys who have sung for me who are now, singing at the highest levels at the Metropolitan Opera and opera houses throughout Europe.
Wow.
I've got boys who have sung with me who are now composers, writing film music and things like that. And others who are music teachers, teaching other children music and how to do. But and many of them, though, who are not involved in music professionally. But in whatever aspect of life that they end up doing professionally, I still hope and pray that they will seek out beauty and that their life will be an aspect of beauty. Their lives will be beauty, an offering of beauty to their Creator.
Yes.
So that they give all that they have for loveliness, for beauty, as an offering to the one who made them, and gave them those abilities.
So it creates an appetite and an acuity and a capacity that will serve them well. And the longer, I would think that they stay with that process of skilled and training and excellent, the more it'll permeate their mindset, their being, in such a way there is a kind of a soulish development of formation that resonates with the beauty. Right. I often associate the Trinity, as you know, with the beauty and the truth and the goodness, the beauty of the Spirit and the truth of the Son and the goodness of the Father, and that there's always been so that beauty in the Spirit points in the created order. He always points beyond himself to the Logos, to the Son, who himself never points to himself, but always to the Father. It's an amazing thought that there is this exquisite drive, a movement, a flow where it becomes upward, so that you're trying to train them to realize that life is inside out and top down.
Right. And, those are hard concepts for any of us to understand.
Any of us to grasp, yeah.
Right? And I think that we often underestimate children's abilities to grapple with deep thoughts.
Yes.
And it's not that we want them all the time just being ascetics and going around and just, deep in thought. But we want them, as they're playing, as they are going about their lives, to recognize that they are a part of a larger picture. That the world does not revolve around them.
That's right.
We all have to learn that in painful ways at some point in our lives. But here they are learning to give of themselves to a higher cause. You know, there are many of them that can be fine soloists and sometimes have opportunities to do so. But where they achieve their truest greatness is not when they're doing solos, but when they are combining all of their efforts and everybody putting in the very best that he has, all to the combined effort to create this particular sound. That all of a sudden they recognize themselves as part of something much bigger, and that together they can accomplish far more than they could ever accomplish by themselves. And that's such an important, valuable lesson that has many, many other aspects other than just music, choral singing. That's in every area of your life.
Yes, and it reminds me, again, we've talked about this before, Wynton Marsalis's definition of jazz. When I saw that on the Ken Burns series on jazz, when he defined it, I couldn't believe it, how good it was. I went back and wrote it down. It was, and then he says jazz, it rewards individual expression, but demands selfless collaboration. And so there's a kind of a jazz in what you do as well, because there's a unique expression that each is rewarded, but that selfless collaboration, the submission to the greater whole, is a very powerful. So it's but not just individualistic or collectivistic, but it's a kind of an interdependency, and the beauty becomes resonant, polyphonic,
right?
Polyphony in that aesthetic polyphony,
right? I mean, it's very true. I mean, that's a brilliant statement. That it requires the utmost personal skill, but then the giving in to the collaboration.
That's correct.
And I mean, I think then you can think of so many other disciplines in life where the same thing holds true.
That's correct.
The very same thing holds
the
true.
same principle. So that it becomes like a jazz of living in any way, but in that best sense of that word so there is the both-andedness. In fact, when we get together for our aesthetic fest, as we have done from time to time, and discussing film or music or literature or whatever, or poetry, it's always such that there's a third person between us that's kind of being enhanced.
Right.
So that it's the us and in the relationship as well. And so the friendship gets layered by means of an appreciation of and participation in certain things that require endeavor, discipline, and pursuit, but they always yield something that's well worth it in the end. But
C.S. Lewis talks about that in the Four Loves, does he not?
He does indeed, yeah. So as I'm teaching on the Four Loves, and I just last week spoke on friendship, and before that the love of Storge, the interesting concept, though, is that each of the human loves has the seeds of its own unique hatreds unless it's brought into the love of Christ. So the divine love of agape, or charity as he calls it, if that is then going to take the bouquet of human loves, of storge, of affection, of friendship, of eros, of the romantic, and to take those, and the epithumia even, is the likings and loves for things that are not human, subhuman. Then what happens is those components become elevated into what they were intended to be by participating in the divine love of God. So each has its own unique gifts, but it also has its unique downsides, depending on what's animating it.
Right. Yeah, that's a really beautiful thought and beautiful statement.
But
yeah.
Given that, then one of the things that you like, what is your most satisfying experience when you see an audience? What is it that makes you get up in the morning? Let's put it that way. And based on all that we've been saying,
I think it's just that I love music so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I love making the music, and it takes a lot of other things other than making the music in order to make the opportunity to make the music.
Yes.
There's
a price to be paid.
So there are a lot of other things that have to happen, but it's all ultimately toward those goals. But it's a chicken and egg kind of thing, because what is our real purpose? I mean, the purpose is to make the music, and I love the music, and yet it wouldn't be possible without the other aspects about dealing with the boys, and I do love that. I love the fellowship that I have with these guys.
Yes,
and I love sharing my love of beauty with them and seeing come alive in them.
It takes life. Yeah, you're creating an aesthetic culture, but it's a culture of skill, of shared experience, of relationships. But it's built around beauty, and seeing that same beauty, bringing it to being, and giving people an appetite and a greater longing for even more. And I think that can be true of the people you've mentored in this manner, but also the audiences who are drawn into a higher longing for something that they couldn't yet name, but you've given them an ineffable experience that they can never forget.
One can hope. I mean,
one can hope, but it's done it for me. I still remember some profound moments in your hearing the Georgia Boys Choir, where I still remember those moments. And I want to return to just each one brings it back.
Well, I'm glad.
It's powerful things. So
I appreciate that.
You are in the world of shaping character, Christ-like character. It always points beyond itself to the one who made it. So it always raises the question, where does that, as C.S. Lewis put it, greatest thing in my life, the greatest thing has been the longing to find out where the beauty comes from. And so that longing, bringing them to that, but giving them an appetite for beauty, an ability to express it, to experience it, and then to express it to others, to share it. But it's going to infuse and inform even their parenting when they're older. It's going to affect every aspect of their life in ways they may not even be aware of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They become recreators of beauty.
That's right.
They absorb it and they reflect it, but not a direct reflection. They absorb it and then they create new beauty.
Yes. Yeah. Unique wavelengths, as it were, aesthetic wavelengths and unique expressions of it. So new beauty is crafted, and it continues, and it has an organic dynamic of growth and mutual enhancement. But I've enjoyed our time together. It's been a rich time, and we will do this again. And next time, though, it would be nice to have maybe a couple audio samples for us to, like Richard Perry's work. I think that would be a terrific thing for us to
Sure.
Yeah. Zoom in on that and even hear a bit and then analyze your thoughts on that. I think that'd be the next time we do that.
I'll look forward to it.
Yeah. God bless you, my friend.
Great. Thanks.
So this has been Explorers with my dear beloved friend, David White.
Thank you for being a part of the Explorers podcast. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.